Let's switch to Fabi because I think he's about to win. I think Alireza really misplayed the position here.
So the commentators had all but written off Alireza Firouzja in a worse position against Fabiano Caruana. But wait till you see what happens. So Alireza had black, Fabi with white, and this was a clash at the top of the table. Fabi leading, Alireza in joint second. So we see pawn c4, the English opening. c6 now from Alireza, and this is already an invitation to go back into a Caro-Kann. You know, this is a possible line. But here Fabi goes knight f3, keeps it in the English opening stuff. We get d5, pawn g3, and now if you win the pawn, well, white's got different ways to win that one back, you know, queen c2, and if you ever try and hold on with b5, well, then you get the a4 stuff undermining, the bishop comes to this diagonal, knight e5, etc. You can never really hang on to the pawn. So g6 played, we get queen a4, now captures on c4, queen recaptures, bishop g7, and pawn d4. So a kind of Catalan-esque position, white with a small edge now, with the space in the centre and lead in development. We see bishop e6 from Alireza. Now it's kind of a strange sequence of play, because now this bishop hits d5. And although it looks great in the centre of the board, you don't normally see a bishop or even both bishops developed before either of the knights. And it looks like you're running straight into knight c3, picking that one up. But then the idea is takes on f3, pawn recaptures, and you can actually pick up a pawn as black with a good game. So that's why no knight c3. We see this knight coming here, defending the other, and it also now threatens e4. So knight f6, very natural, stops e4. We now see queen c2, threatening e4 once again, and so queen a5, stops e4 because it pins this knight. Bishop g2 played, and now this is a really important moment. First, let me show you what happens if you play too casually and you castle. Well, white can castle, and you've just broken the pin against this knight. So now if you go c5 as black, which we see in the game, well, e4 can come. The bishop drops and d5. Much better position for white, good pawn structure. So that's why we see the immediate c5 before castles. There's no time for e4 now. That one would just be taken. The knight is pinned. And by the way, the reason this is best for black is that if you play, say, knight bd7, you're getting a really passive pawn structure, basically. So we see castles, takes on d4. Now this does open up the c8 square, and you can check like this. But then the black queen drops. This is how the line could go, and actually this is okay for black. You know, although the king can't castle, it's an endgame, it's playable. But what we see instead is pawn b4 from Fabi. So he's saying, please go ahead and take. I'm then going to checkmate you. So of course Alireza doesn't do that. The queen retreats, and now bishop b2. But it's an opening success for Fabi. You know, he's picking up tempos. He's got space in the center. We see castles. Bishop takes on d4. Knight c6. Hitting bishop, hitting pawn. The bishop drops back to c3. Rook c8 lines up with the queen, so queen b2 forms the battery on the long diagonal. And now a5 from Alireza, he wants to clarify things with this advanced pawn. And if white pushes on, well, then the knight's going to hop to b4. This is the idea, and it's a nice outpost for that knight. Now, if you take, after pawn recaptures, if you go pawn hunting, well, you can actually take here first to clear the d5 square, and however white captures, you then land a knight there, hit the queen, and also open up the bishop on the rook. So taking that one is no good. Whoops, sorry, in this line, taking no good. And if you go a3, well, then there's this thematic idea of sacking the exchange. But once again, you open up all this deadly stuff along the diagonal. I won't keep going and going with the line here. So what we see instead was takes on a5. Alireza recaptures with the knight and rook ac1. Very logical, and although Alireza now would love to get this knight back into the game, you know, immediately if possible, it's just not working out because you can capture, rook recaptures, and then rook fd1, and it's all really uncomfortable for black. You know, there's a pin, so queen c8, one of the top moves, but then there's knight e5. You hit the rook with the knight, whoops, and you open up this double attack here. So, you know, if the rook retreats, well, you're simply just winning a piece. If the rook doesn't retreat, you know, it could take here maybe, but then you're giving in exchange. It's just bad for white. So it's a flavour of why this knight is stuck out on the edge, and this pawn is now a bit tender as well. So knight h5 from Alireza. He exchanges these bishops. The knight drops back. Rook takes on c8. Queen recaptures, and rook c1. More tempos being picked up. The queen slides to d8, and now knight e5 gets rid of that monster bishop on d5, king recaptures, and after knight e6, looking at the d4 square, knight df3, well, here we can see the uncomfortable nature of Alireza's position. This knight still out on a limb, this pawn weak and dropping if the knight ever moves. These ones not in the game the same way these ones are. These knights are both better than their counterparts. Now what should Alireza do? Well, f6, best move, to drive back this really powerful knight, and then something like queen d7, start trying to unravel. But what we see in the game is queen d5, and it's too ambitious. Fabi goes rook c3, excellent move. Rook c2, also good. The idea is to swing to the d file. Now if you go f6 here, things are a bit different, because now the rook hits the d file, hits the queen, queen e4 is the best move, and now there's just some really probing moves for white. So one of them is queen a3. You hit this one, you hit the pawn. Now the computer's top line is taking here, the queen takes on a5, and okay, you can see the pawn structure is just an absolute mess. So we didn't see f6. Rook a8 played instead, trying to get some counterplay against this pawn, and after rook d3, preparing queen c5, but not running into knight d7, forking the queen on c5, and rook on f8. So rook d7 now played, and this is the big problem. You can see Fabi's now invaded with that rook because the knight never got driven away. So rook e8 comes back to defend that pawn. Again, sorry, if f6, then there's knight d3, this sneaky knight retreating move. And the queen can't stay on this diagonal with the pawn, so it's dropping. So that's why rook e8 back covers the pawn. And now a4 played, knight d3 was also possible, but this has an idea of swapping queens. So we get knight c4, the knights are captured. And if you win this pawn, well then this one drops, and this is a sample line. Yes, you win a second pawn, but this endgame is going to be really hard to win for Fabi. Pawn up, but on the same side of the board. So instead, he goes queen b5. These ones got chopped off. The pawn recaptures, and look at Alireza's time, really getting low. He goes knight c5, defending the b7 pawn. Rook c7 attacks the knight. Pawn b6 defends, knight e5 now played, and f6. Things are really getting tricky, so much pressure on all of these pieces. So knight c4 hops back, hits the b6 pawn, knight a4 defends, and now Fabi's clearly got the edge, but he has to press in the right manner. So for example, if you go rook a7 to hit this one, remove the defender of this pawn, well then knight c3 is picking up this one, and actually black's doing okay. And equally, if instead of hitting that knight, you do say rook b7, well then the idea is rook c8. You go for counterplay, you do give a pawn, yes, but then you come in, hit this one and come behind the passed pawn. And in theory, this should be a draw at this top level with this rook so actively placed. So that's why Fabi, he goes knight e3, excellent move, which was praised by Alireza. It's heading for this d5 square. And again, there's these amazing computer defenses where it wants to just give up a pawn basically and go for activity. But Alireza plays more humanly, pawn e6, but you can see the computer doesn't love it because we get rook b7, threat is knight c4, rook c8 covers, but now knight g4, we see the switch, and the black king is horribly placed, dominated by the rook. So this rook slides back, but now check, king h8, check from f7, the king sidesteps, both players are now very low on time. We get knight d6 and pawn f5, and this is move 40. Both players have made time control, and in these final moves, this is where Alireza had just been written off. But here, Fabi, he makes a blunder that gives away his advantage. What should he do? Well, rook c7 is the way to go. And there's no immediate win or anything like that. You know, rook d8's top move, rook c6. But the problem is the pieces are really tied down, they're passive, they're defending pawns, and white can slowly improve the position. You know, these are a few sample moves. Whoop, moving the king here. And, you know, knight c8 can start to pick this one up. There's ideas of e4 soon. Just very, very pleasant for white to press. And Alireza felt it must have been lost. But what do we see in the game? Knight c4. Looks so logical to go after this pawn, but there's the simple rook f7, and it's a dead draw because you're forcing the rooks off. Now, if you try and take here, well, obviously it's impossible. You're just dropping in exchange. That's completely lost. So instead we see check. The rook comes back, and now if ever they swap off, well, after king recaptures, you can even come knight whose move is it? Sorry, white's move. So say e3, well, you can even come knight c3, you know, liquidate the pawns like this, or you can just hold the tension, king e7, whatever, just a completely drawn position. So these were the final moves. We see a threefold repetition, peaceful result, but fighting game. If you enjoyed this one, then check out another amazing Alireza game on screen, and thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.